Hey, what's good, y'all? It's your boy Michael J, and I'm back again with another video, and today I'll be presenting my top 5 favorite animated movies of all time. Now, as usual, before I start this list, here are my honorable mentions. Madagascar, Escape to Africa, A Goofy Movie, Monsters Inc., Batman Beyond, Return of the Joker, The Incredibles, and Shrek. So without wasting any time, let's get straight to the list. Starting at number 5, I have Flushed Away. Now, I've always thought that Flushed Away was so criminally underrated because when it comes to discussing like the best DreamWorks movies of all time, it's probably like one of the most less talked about. But I've always thought it was so enjoyable because I remember watching this a lot when I was about 10 or 11 years old. A couple days ago, I rewatched it for like the first time in like 8 years, and I ended up getting the same amount of enjoyment as much as I did when I was a kid. I've always been so enamored with Aardman Animations because they have such a unique style in their movies, most particularly films like Wallace and Gromit and Chicken Run. But what makes Flushed Away stand out above those two movies was the fact that Aardman decided to use CGI instead of going for that typical stop motion formula, which makes the animation in this film look astounding. The film has likable characters that are fleshed out, great pacing, funny jokes, and it's filled with such a spectacular voice cast of amazing actors from Hugh Jackman, Kate Winslet, Andy Serkis, and even Sir Ian McKellen as the Toad. Well, it's not particularly anything special or mind-blowing, but overall, Flushed Away is such a fun movie that I always have a great time rewatching. At number 4, I have Toy Story 2. Like most people growing up, I absolutely love the Toy Story movies because I think all 4 of them are just damn near perfect films with great themes. But if I had to pick a favorite, I would definitely say the second one for sure. Toy Story 2 was definitely a fantastic follow-up to its predecessor, as almost everything served to be a huge step up to the first one. From the storytelling, the pacing, the character development, the jokes, and pretty much just doing what a great sequel should do. We are introduced to new wonderful characters like Jussie, the wild cowgirl, Bullseye, the lovable stuffed horse, and even Stinky Pete, who I thought made a very good villain, especially when it came to looking at his motivation, which was very understandable and relatable. What I really love about Toy Story 2 is the way we get to understand more about Woody as we discover what kind of toy he is or what kind of toy he wants to be, especially when it came to the third act, which I think is like unequivocally like the greatest part of this entire film. All the other characters are just as charming as ever, and even the animation is also a slight improvement as well. And even though I'm still trying to debate if I think Toy Story 2 is better than the first one or not, but it was an excellent addition to the Toy Story franchise nonetheless. Coming at number 3, I have Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse. Now, I remember when Spider-Verse came out, and I wasn't expecting too much out of it, but after the first time watching it in theaters, it immediately became one of my favorite animated movies of all time because I was so blown away of how amazing it was. It's one of the best and most unique looking animated movies that I have ever seen. The animation style of this movie is just visually stunning with its bright colors and the wonderful designs. It's probably the best Spider-Man adaptation since the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, and speaking of it, the movie is filled with a bunch of references to the original Spider-Man trilogy, which is so satisfying for me to see, considering the fact that I grew up adoring those movies as a kid. It's all about Miles Morales, who has such an amazing character arc with his journey on becoming Spider-Man, and he's being mentored by Peter B. Parker, who is like a more older and gruffer version of Spider-Man, whom I thought was so intriguing because how this movie did such a good job of showcasing how he lost himself and how being Spider-Man took a toll on his life and his relationships. And that's the type of Peter Parker I've always wanted to see on screen. It's also filled with a bunch of other likable side characters, especially the Spider Gang, and while I feel like most of them could have been a lot more fleshed out, I thought the character dynamics were very good. Spider-Verse did such a superb job of understanding the themes of being Spider-Man, along with sending great messages like how anybody can be Spider-Man regardless of who they are and where they came from. It's inspiring, it's beautiful, it's well written, and amazingly crafted. Coming at number 2, I have Shrek 2. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I'm definitely one of those people who truly believe that Shrek 2 is way better than the first one. Now, don't get me wrong, the original Shrek is undeniably an iconic animated movie, but Shrek 2 is just fucking brilliant because to me, it is such a perfect sequel. Now, everybody already knows all the list of movies when it comes to discussing all-time greatest sequels: Empire Strikes Back, The Dark Knight, Terminator 2 Judgment Day, Spider-Man 2, and Captain America: The Winter Soldier. But if you ask me, Shrek 2 definitely deserves to be in that conversation along with the other great sequels. Shrek 2 is just so great because how it does such an excellent job of carrying the themes from the first movie and expanding on them in such a pleasurable way by showing us what happens after Happily Ever After. I really love how it explores the relationship between Shrek and Fiona because of all the tough challenges they go through in their marriage, which really showcases how much they truly love one another. In addition, we are introduced to new characters like Puss in Boots, voiced by Antonio Banderas, Fiona's parents, the King and Queen, voiced by John Cleese and Julie Andrews, Prince Charming, and especially the fairy godmother, who made such a fantastic villain. And while Lord Farquaad was a pretty good villain in the first Shrek movie, she was just a huge step up because of how manipulative she was, and she just made much of a bigger threat. Plus, the third act was unequivocally like the greatest part of this entire film, because that's where it goes from being very good to just being downright brilliant. That scene always gets me every time because you have Shrek trying to invade the castle before Prince Charming kisses Fiona. And what made that entire sequence even better is when you had the fairy godmother singing the cover of Holding Out for a Hero, which was just absolutely perfect. It's probably like the greatest climax I've ever seen in an animated movie, if you ask me. And number 1, The Lion King. If any of y'all have seen my video where I ranked my 10 favorite movies of all time, then y'all should not be surprised that Lion King topped my list, because I fucking adore this movie. Not only do I think it's Disney's masterpiece, I think it's the greatest animated movie of all time. It is. Like, I truly believe that. It's just such an endearing movie with a phenomenal musical score by Hans Zimmer, amazing storytelling, incredibly emotional moments, an excellent soundtrack, and it's just filled with so many great characters. From Mufasa, Simba, Zazu, Rafiki, Nala, Timon, Pumbaa, and especially Scar, who was like my absolute favorite movie villain of all time. Lion King really just sends a good message about dealing with your past regardless of all the terrible mistakes you made, and to stand up for yourself and for your family as well. I will cry every time Mufasa falls to his death, and I will always jump for joy every time Simba returns home to the Pride Lands and defeats Scar to take his rightful place as king. And the fact that Disney really had the audacity to think that they can do a better job with that shitty ass live action remake is honestly just so baffling. But nonetheless, The Lion King is such an animated masterpiece, which is why it was, is, and always will be my favorite animated movie of all time. And that's my list. What are your 5 favorite animated movies of all time? Feel free to comment down below. Be sure to subscribe to my channel for weekly videos. I'm your boy Micah J, and peace.